Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. I'm Susan Harada. I'm the Associate Director of the School of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University and the head of the journalism program there. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are all gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Peter Stursberg was a trailblazer, the first to cover Canadian troops in the field during the Second World War, the last living war correspondent from that era at the time of his death in 2014. So for those reasons and more, his daughter Judy Laurie and his son Richard Stursberg established an endowed fund with the journalism program at Carleton. They're both here tonight, and you'll hear from them in a moment. In the meantime, please join me in thanking Judy and Richard. The fund that they established supports two very special initiatives that speak to the legacy of their father. The first is the Peter Stursberg Award in Conflict Journalism and Media Studies. It helps journalism students produce work that's related to media and conflict. And the second, of course, is this lecture series. It's designed to underscore the pivotal role that conflict journalists have always played in keeping us informed, especially these days, it seems, with ongoing conflicts, many potential flashpoints, millions forcibly displaced. The one way we can try to make sense of what's happening and why is by reading, watching, and listening to smart journalism produced by smart journalists. And we could ask for no better partner in this venture than the Canadian War Museum. So it's my great pleasure to now introduce Glenn Ogden, Acting Director, Exhibitions, Creative Development, and Learning.
Thank you, Susan. Miss Di Giovanni, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bonnie Downson Theatre here at the Canadian War Museum. Le musée est fier de vous accueillir ce soir et de présenter cette activité en collaboration avec l'École de journalisme et de communication de l'Université de Carleton. My thanks to Ms. Harada and her colleagues, and to Richard Stursberg and his family for once again making this evening possible. And welcome, of course, to Janine Di Giovanni. We are honored to host another accomplished and respected journalist for the sophomore year of this lecture series. Although this museum is marking the centenary of the end of the First World War and the 75th of the Second World War, conflict remains part of the story of humankind. The Canadian War Museum has a responsibility to turn its eye to contemporary subjects, and this lecture series is one of the programs we take on to help us make sense of more contemporary military history. Les meilleurs journalistes, comme les meilleurs historiens, font preuve d'une étonnante curiosité et d'un dévouement certain à découvrir la vérité. Ils ont un fervent désir d'accroître les connaissances et la compréhension du public. Museums play a similar role. Our job at the Canadian War Museum is to explore the broad strokes of history. So, over the past 4 years, we've produced numerous exhibitions and special programming to commemorate the First World War centenary. But we also have explored women at war and women living in conflict zones. We presented war through the lens of art, literature, and even the language of flowers. And we continue to examine the important role played by journalists in deconstructing the politics of conflict, whether in presentations such as the yearly World Press Photo Exhibition or lectures like this. Never has there been a more important time to recognize the critical work of journalism in conflict zones. C'est un privilège pour nous d'ouvrir une discussion éclairée sur la guerre et le conflit, surtout en si bonne compagnie. Just on a programming note, I also invite you to stop by the museum's boutique, where you can purchase a copy of Janine Di Giovanni's book, The Morning They Came For Us. And please note it closes at 9 p.m. So thank you all. Yeah, I have to say that. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and I hope you enjoy what promises to be a very informative and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you very much, Messi.
When my sister and I were thinking about this, we were thinking about something that we might do in memory of our father. And as people have said, and you'll see this is a very short film afterwards, he was a war correspondent during the Second World War and went on as a journalist and as a writer for the rest of his life. But we thought, what should we do? The fact is that the shape of combat, the shape of war has morphed and changed. People don't so much anymore have large armies with people in uniform fighting each other. What we have more and more is we have irregular wars. We have wars that are guerrilla wars. We have wars that are civil wars. We have wars of terrorism. We're starting now to see the emergence of cyber wars. And dare I say, even to a certain extent, trade wars that are used in the same way as conventional war to punish and coerce people. So we thought that what would be a useful thing to do is to see if we could set up a set of arrangements that might assist people better to understand how to cover the shifting nature of war and the shifting nature of combat. Because as the nature of combat changes, obviously the nature of the journalism to cover it has to change. And so it was with that in mind that we put together the scholarship and the lecture series. And as Susan was just saying earlier on, the key to understanding combat and new forms of combat is in fact great journalism. So thank you very much for coming this evening.
The Peter Stursberg Award in Conflict Journalism and Media Studies is awarded each year to an outstanding graduate student attending Carleton University's Master of Journalism program, doing research work on a subject related to human conflict or conflict resolutions. Our first winner of this award is Ash Abraham. Her research project is called How Social Relationships Impact the Process of Integration of North Koreans Living in South Korea. It is my great honor to present the first annual Peter Stursberg Award to Ash Abraham.
Thank you.
This one's yours, so this is for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Richard, to the Stursberg family. And thank you, Carleton School of Journalism, for entrusting me with this award. With it, I'm documenting stories of North Korean defectors integrating into South Korea. And I'm looking at the implications this has for reunification of North and South Korea. Because of the great polarity between the North and the South, it can be easy for us journalists to generalize North Koreans and miss the nuances of their experiences. I first realized this a few years back when I was living in Seoul, where I met a North Korean woman who expressed to me her desire to smuggle herself back to North Korea. This surprised me. She'd gone through a lot, escaping into China, traveling through Thailand, and finally receiving asylum and safety in South Korea, and now she was telling me that she wanted to go back. When I asked why she'd ever considered doing this, she looked at me and said with all sincerity, "The apples." I said, "What?" She said, "The apples in North Korea are sweeter than the apples in South Korea." I didn't fact check that for you tonight, but I do think that the sentiment can ring true. This woman told me about her life in North Korea, her boyfriend, her mother, her friends, and how in the South, she was alone, struggling to survive Seoul's fast-paced environment. While talks to end Korea's 65-year-long conflict loom large, this woman remains in limbo, in a place where even the apples are a bitter reminder of a home she can't return to. So, with this award, I am researching the unexpected and underreported stories of North Koreans. And these stories add up. We always talk about what a reunified North and South Korea will look like. Well, there's 30,000 North Korean people living inside South Korea right now. And I think their stories can offer us some insight into how Korea might peacefully reconcile, which would be good news for all of us. So thank you again for this award. I have a lot of work ahead of me, so stay tuned.